By the end of this video, I will share a detailed review of the Hoyt RX-7 Ultra, which I have been shooting for over a year and a half. I will then detail how it blew up in my hands while taking a shot on the biggest whitetail of my life. I will also tell you how you can enter a raffle today to win the compound bow of your dreams. Then I'm going to detail how I'm embarking on the largest review series this channel has ever attempted, and that's going to accompany the largest raffle series this channel has ever attempted. Welcome back to another Mindful Review. I'm your host as always, Jay Nichol. First, quick reminder, this review, along with all my other reviews, is brought to you by Mindful Reviews. This is the online platform I have built from scratch where members get to request and participate in the reviews that I post on this channel. They get to participate in the raffles for the gear that I review on this channel. And lifetime members are entered to win monthly prizes. If you like what I do and you want to support it and you want to participate in these reviews and raffles, go to mindful-reviews.com. All right, I opened the video with a lot of information, so let's dig into those things one at a time. First of all, I've been shooting this bow, Hoyt RX-7 Ultra 34, for the last year and a half. I've been meaning to do a review on this bow for a while, and it just kind of kept falling by the wayside. Then I was on a whitetail hunt last week. I was at full draw on the biggest whitetail I've ever come to full draw on to date. I'll put a picture of it right here. And when I released the arrow, what felt like happened is the bow blew up in my hand. I was in a ground blind. There was noise. The bow kind of twisted in my hands, and I was completely kind of discombobulated. I was like, I didn't even know what happened. And the buck just ran, and I was like, what? And then I was hanging the bow. I was holding the bow, and I noticed there was something just hanging. And at first, I thought the rest blew apart. That's what in my head I thought happened. And then after taking some pictures and chilling out with it for a bit, it became clear that because it's a carbon fiber bow, the attachment device for the rest does not screw directly into the riser. There is a metal insert that is epoxied onto the carbon fiber riser, and that entire insert came out. So while at first, I shoot a Hamsky Epsilon rest, and so at first I thought it was a rest issue, and then I realized it was a bow issue. All this is going on while I think I've completely missed this buck, and it was just madness. So I'll wrap up the buck story quickly and then we'll get back to the bow. Anyways, what happened was I did hit the buck. I was able to find blood about 50 yards away. We tracked the buck over 2 days for almost a mile. We found the arrow after 250 yards. At first, I was pretty optimistic. I thought I'd got a fatal shot on the buck. But the longer we tracked the buck and the more the blood dried up, and the fact that the buck did not bed down even once within a mile, we're able to find no coyotes, no birds the following day. It was pretty cold. It was in Saskatchewan. We had a bit of snow. It eventually became quite clear that this buck was going to live. Now, playing the situation back in my mind, now I'm a right-handed shooter, so the rest goes on the right side of the bow, like shooter's right. So when the rest came off, that would have kicked the nock of the arrow to the right, which would have taken the broadhead to the left. And the deer was broadside with his head here, which means I shot back this way. Now, the only thing I can think of is that I think I shot the buck because it got kicked to the back through one of the hindquarters. And that's why the arrow got dragged 250 yards. But with the color and the smell of the blood that we were finding, it did look like muscle blood, and it was coagulating on the veins of the arrow. So there's enough information there for me to believe that the hit wasn't fatal and that it was far back. Because it was even so far back, there was no guts, there was no liver blood. Anyways, all of this is speculation. It was an outfitted hunt. That outfitter has a ton of cameras in the area, so I'm really hoping there was still 2 more groups of hunters to come in. He was hunting for another 2 additional weeks. So I'm hoping that some cameras will pop up. I'm going to dive deeper into this on my podcast. So if you want to hear even more of the story and how all that hunt went, the Mindful Hunter podcast, check that out. I'll dive into all of it this week. But anyways, that kind of accelerated the rationale or the impetus for me to do a review on this bow. Because I was like, well, now I definitely have to review this because this is just a crazy circumstance. And as always, just reviewing one product in isolation is not something that I feel is super beneficial. So I started thinking about what can I add to the community? Like, how could I create a bow review that would be beneficial to everybody? Up until now, I've held off on bow reviews. And to be honest with you, it's because I thought there were people more qualified to do bow reviews than I was. I mean, I'm a good shooter. I have my own press. I know how to tune. I understand the mechanics of archery. But when you listen to a guy like Dudley or Elk Shape or any of these other like hardcore archers, I just always felt like I'm not on their level. They're doing good archery stuff. I'll go focus on other stuff that's more my lane. However, when I started looking at reviews, when this thing blew up and I was like, maybe I should get a new bow, I was struck by 2 things that I thought I could fix. Number 1, almost all of the guys doing bow reviews are sponsored by somebody. Now, not all of them, but the 2 guys I just mentioned, Elk Shape is with Matthews and John Dudley is with PSE. Now, I highly respect both of these gentlemen. I think they do a lot to contribute to the community, but they will never give you an objective assessment of the market as a whole. They're sponsored, so they're always going to be biased towards their particular bow company, which I do not begrudge them. I understand that's the way that it works for most, content creators these days. But I thought, okay, I can do something about that. Number 2, I think a lot of bow reviews and a lot of archery information gets overly technical. I think people think the more complicated they make it, the more people will believe them. And the problem is there's a small sect of super technical archers up at the one end that those reviews are good for, but then the bulk of the archery public in the middle, it kind of goes over their head. And I thought to myself, I think I have enough understanding of archery and I think I have a good enough way of communicating that I can do a bow review that kind of sits right in the middle, that's technical enough to be nuanced and interesting, but also explained well enough and clearly enough that it's useful to a wider array of people. So that being said, I thought to myself, okay, let's do a large-scale bow review. But bows are so complicated, it's not like I can get 5 or 6 bows at once, shoot them all for a week. Like, that's just not my style. That's the other thing that a lot of these guys do. They get the bow, they shoot 6 arrows through it, and then they give you a 20-minute YouTube review. And I was just like, that doesn't land very well with me. So here's my plan for the bow review. This will be the first one. I shot it for 1.5 years. I know it inside and out. I feel very qualified to give a review on this bow. Then what I'm going to do, and I'm going to stick to aluminum riser bows first for 2 reasons. Number 1, clearly I'm a little, upset with carbon fiber risers at the moment because of what happened with this epoxied insert on this particular bow. But number 2, I wanted to do the more affordable bows first, and it's only fair. If I just open it up to carbon and aluminum, it's like those aren't even comparable. You got to do apples to apples and oranges to oranges. So first things first, we're going to do aluminum riser bows. Now, here's the companies that I'm currently looking at including and the bows. So the Expedition X-Lite 33, the Elite Ethos, the Bear Persist, the Dart and Departure, the APA Black Mamba Pro, Prime RVX, Hoyt Alpha X33, Matthews Lift, PSE Evolve 33, and the Bowtech Core SR. Now, I can't do all of those. It would take way too long, but I think maybe I'll do 6. So here's what I'm going to do. Also, I've contacted all of these bow companies. None of them have got back to me, Bear got back to me and said they're just not interested in participating, like lending me a bow. I totally respect that. This is one of the issues with not being sponsored. There's really not a huge incentive for these bow companies to give you bows because they can't guarantee what you're going to say about their bow. And again, I don't begrudge them this. I don't expect people to give me free stuff. So here's what I'm going to do. First of all, to kick this thing off, we're going to have a big raffle. Because I thought to myself, while I'm looking at new bows and while I'm reviewing all these bows, I think it would be super exciting. All the new bows just launched. Like, let's do a raffle for a bow of the winner's choice. So as of right now, as of today, I'm starting the kickoff raffle for this review series. So here's what you will win. If you enter the raffle and are drawn, you will win any aluminum riser bow of your choice. So I'm assuming it will be one of the 2024 models. Any of the ones on that list that I just went through, you pick it, I'll pay for it. I'm also going to include $500 for accessories. So that could be your rest, your sight. If you've already got a rest and a sight on another bow and you just want to put it on the new bow and you want to use that $500 to build yourself some new arrows, totally fine. There's no limits on what you got to do. So if you want to enter that review, you go to mindful-reviews.com. You need to be a member. All the information is there. If you're already a member, you were already notified about this review earlier today. Now, if you're watching this review sometime in the future, go check the notes in the description, because if the review is sold out, there will be a very limited number of tickets. And if the review is sold out, I will note it in the comments, or sorry, in the description below. So don't buy a new membership because you can't get tickets. So that raffle is launching right away. Now, as soon as I'm done with this review, that raffle is launched. I'm then going to go back to Mindful Reviews and I'm going to put this list of bows up for vote. And based on popularity, I'm going to pick the top 6 voted bows, and I'm just going to start at number 1. I'm going to go out and let's say the Expedition X-Lite 33 gets picked first. I'm going to go and I'm going to buy an Expedition X-Lite 33. I'm going to outfit it with my components and I'm going to shoot it for a month. Now, I'm not going to take it into the bush. I'm not going to take it into a hunt. I want to protect the quality of the bow, but I'm going to shoot it for a month. I will keep it in pristine condition. At the end of that month, I will do a detailed review on that bow and I will raffle that bow off and we'll see how this goes. If people are still interested in buying the bows, we will keep the raffle series going. If they're not, I'll just go sell the bows used and take a hit. But that's what I'm committing to do for this review. We're going to go through 6 bows. I'm going to buy all 6 bows, and then we'll either raffle them off if the community is interested in participating in the raffles, or I'll go sell them used and use the money to help, facilitate the purchase of the next bow. And that's going to take kind of the next 6 months. Now, at the end of that 6 months, what I'm going to do is like a wrap-up video. So I will be creating a spreadsheet with all of the results from all of the scores for all of the bows. And at the end, I'll do a big wrap-up and I will rank the bows and tell you where they sit. Now, with all that being said, these are the categories that we're going to be looking at: price, specs, weight, materials, tunability, balance, sound, speed, vibration, draw cycle, extras, and shootability. Now, I'm going to give each bow a score of 1 to 5 in all of those categories. The better the bow performs, the higher the score. So a 5 is a perfect score, and a 0 would be the lowest possible score you could get. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. Because this is the only bow I've shot for the last year and a half, I'm somewhat limited in my ability to rank it among other bows. So I'm giving myself permission to go back in and kind of retroactively adjust the scores. Like, for example, this is the best horizontally leveling bow I've ever shot. Like, every time I come back to full draw, my bubble is right in the middle. So I'm going to give this bow a 5 out of 5 in horizontal leveling ability. However, if during my review I somehow shoot a bow that is even better than that, I'm gonna go back in and move this down to a 4 so that when I go back to do the overall comparison against all the bows, we have like a more comprehensive assessment of where all the bows sit in relation to each other. So I do want you guys to have your voice in this kind of like big scale review as well. So if there's other categories that you think that should be looked at, or if you have a particular bow in mind off that list that you want to see, drop the note in the comment section below and we'll get it done. So first off, let's jump into price. Currently, this bow is listed at $1750 US. Now I'm gonna pull all my pricing off of Lancaster Archery so that we have kind of a central agreement on where I'm pulling pricing from, because lots of times there's a different price from MSRP, what could be listed on some bow retailers, and what's listed on the manufacturer's site. Now, some of the bows I'm gonna review are direct to consumer. So if that's the case, I will simply use the price off their website because that's the price that everyone has access to. Also, most of these flagship bows don't ever go on sale, and the manufacturers have very strict guidelines for retailers, so I don't think we're gonna see a whole lot of discrepancy. So this bow is currently $1750. However, when it was launched in 2022, it was $1,900. So being that this is the only carbon bow that we're looking at until we get into the carbon bow series, I'm not gonna give this a score for price because it's really kind of sitting by itself. Now, the next category is specs. Now, this is an unranked category, but I wanted to give an overview of the construction specs for the bow. So it's a 34-inch axle-to-axle bow with a brace height of 7 inches, an IBO speed of 334, that's advertised. Draw length varies from 27 to 32 inches. You can draw weight from 40 to 80 pounds, and you can select either 80 to 85% let off. It comes in 9 different finishes, I believe 4 or 5 camos and 4 or 5 solids. The other thing is I have upgraded this when I bought it with the Gas Ghost camo strings. So that's the basic rundown. I also use an 8-inch front stabilizer, no side stabilizer. As I mentioned before, the Hamskea Epsilon Rest and the Black Gold Pro Hunter HD sight. Now these are the same components that I'm going to use on all of the bows, so it should level the playing field as far as performance goes. The other thing that I'm going to do with the other bows is I will weigh them when they show up, and I will physically measure all the measurements as far as axle to axle and brace height. As usual, one of the pieces of value that I like to deliver is double checking advertised information. We'll get into the speed later because that's another area where bows tend to fail pretty hard as far as advertised information goes. So this bow is advertised at 4.3 pounds, which if you completely strip it down, like you got to get rid of all the rubber components, you got to get rid of the front stabilizer. Is there anything else you can strip off of this thing? It might even include but if you get rid of everything, it gets down to pretty close to 4.3 pounds. So that is as advertised. Now to put that in perspective, the Bowtech Carbon 1 clocks in at 4.5 and the RX-8 clocks in at 4.5. So this sits pretty well as far as weight goes with other carbon bows. The one exception to that would be PSE. The Mach 34 weighs 3.65 pounds. It is an extremely lightweight bow. So I would rank this 4 out of 5 with weight as far as carbon goes. It's good, but not the best. Materials, obviously, it's carbon. Now, there are some metal bits on here, but I think the main distinction here is the difference between carbon fiber bows and aluminum bows. There's also an interesting kind of magnesium composite in one of the bows that we might look at that intrigues me quite a bit. Okay, now let's get into some more interesting stuff like my subjective experience with this bow. Let's look at tunability. So in all fairness, I drove down to the bow rack. Kellen, who used to work there, who now works at G4, Inside Out Precision on YouTube and Instagram. He's one of probably, in my opinion, the most valuable kind of content creators in the archery space because he's not sponsored. He works at a bow shop. He's got access to tons of bow, and I find him, really objective considering he's a professional in the industry. He set this bow up for me. I had to paper tune it twice. I literally shot 2 arrows. We made adjustments both times, and then I was shooting bullet holes. Like, it was a dream to set up. Now, before this bow, I had a Hoyt Pro Defiant 34 that was a nightmare to get a bullet hole out of. You had to introduce cam lean and yoke tune and do all this. It was insane. To the point where that's why I bought my own bow press and learned as much as I did about tuning bows, because I kept taking it into target shops. There's no decent hunting archery shops in Vancouver. So you take it to these target shops and they would just not understand the needs of a hunter. Like, I need this bow to be tuned so that it shoots as well with a broadhead as it does with a field point. Target guys only shoot with field points. And to be honest with you, tuning a bow so a field point shoots well is not very difficult. In fact, you don't even really got to tune it that well. It's not until you stick a broadhead on the arrow that the inappropriate tuning really surfaces. So I'm giving it a 5 out of 5 on tunability. It tuned super fast. And in addition to that, I've never had to touch this bow once. I've checked the timing multiple times. It never lost timing sync. I've never had to re-level the sight. I've never had to retune it in any way, shape, or form. And I've been on a lot of really tough hunts with this thing. It's been through its share of bush, and it's always held up extremely well. All right, up next, let's discuss balance. So we are going to look at both the X and Y axis in regards to balance. So not only how well it levels when you come back to full draw, but after you shoot, how does the bow behave? And so I'm giving this bow a 4 out of 5. As I mentioned before, it has the best left to right leveling of any bow I've ever shot. However, the ass end, the bottom end does tend to kick out a little bit when it's shot, and I would prefer a more balanced bow, or even one that kind of has a tendency to lean forward after the shot. So 4 out of 5, but incredibly well balanced bow overall. Now, sound. Now let's discuss sound. Moving forward, I'm going to have a decibel meter, and I will actually record how loud each bow is, and we will have objective evidence as to say which is the quieter bow. Now, obviously, due to this particular issue, I can't shoot this bow right now. And because it's going to go in for warranty repair, I really don't want to do anything that would, risk the warranty. So I'm not going to record this bow now. But when it comes back from warranty, I will record it, and I will update the spreadsheet when we do the final comparisons with all the rest. Now, for speed, I'm not going to do the whole IBO speed thing because I don't want to build a whole bunch of 350 grain arrows. Nobody shoots 350 grain arrows. It's kind of a stupid number, and it doesn't make any sense to me. So I shoot a 485 grain arrow. I have a 29.5-inch draw. I build 31-inch arrows, and I pull 70 pounds. I have a chronograph. I've shot this bow through it. It shoots at 283 feet per second. So I'm going to use the exact same arrow setup on all of the bows. And that way we'll have a more realistic appraisal, because that's a pretty average hunting arrow these days. Some guys shoot a little closer to 400. Some guys shoot a little closer to 500 plus. But I think a 485 grain arrow, everyone would agree, is not an extreme arrow in any end of the spectrum. So 283 feet per second. And that was actually part of why I designed the arrow that way. I wanted something that was shooting 280 to 290. Slightly heavier arrow, keeps the bow a little bit quieter, and keeping it at that speed tends to be a little bit more forgiving. Moving on to vibration. Again, this is a little bit tricky because it's the only bow I've shot for the last year and a half, but I do remember when I shot this bow in comparison with other bows down at the bow rack, how dead in the hand it was. And it really does suck up the vibration quite well. It's a very pleasing bow to shoot. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 with the caveat that may get adjusted the more bows that we review. Draw cycle is something very interesting. So when I first got this bow, I found it a fairly pleasant draw cycle. The longer I had the bow and the more I guess it kind of broke in for me, I'm not as impressed with the draw cycle as I was initially. And this is another reason why I want to keep these bows for a month each. Because I think you need to shoot a few hundred arrows through a bow to really get used to that bow and to get to know that bow. And if I was going to describe the issue with the draw cycle, it has the fall over is quite severe and the valley is pretty long. So let me explain what that means. So because you have cams on a compound bow, basically you pull up past the peak weight. So a 70-pound bow at its hardest point to pull, when it's maybe 75% pulled back, you hit 70 pounds. Then the cams roll over and your holding weight is normally between 80 and 85% less than what your draw weight is. So think of your holding weight being, let's say, 20% of your full draw weight. So if it's a 70-pound bow, your holding weight will be somewhere around 14 pounds. Now, when it falls off over that peak, people talk about how hard the back wall is. They talk about how large the valley is. And the valley is that distance between where it falls off and where you hit your back wall. Now, if those two things are right beside each other, if you let off at all, that bow bites and pulls you forward. That's what you're looking for in a competition bow, because they're looking to stay alert. They want to do the same thing again and again and again. With a hunting bow, you're looking for a little bit bigger of a valley, and you're looking for a slightly larger let off, because you could pull back and need to sit there for a minute while an animal does whatever it's going to do before you get a chance to take a shot. Now, the thing with that deep valley and the kind of harsh rollover is that I find if I pull this bow back as hard as I need to fluidly get through the peak, I kind of slam into that back wall. And then it kind of like shakes me up a bit, and it takes me a while to settle back down into my shot. Otherwise, I'm kind of hesitant as I pull through the peak so that I softly drop into the valley and the back wall. And I just find like that's a bit of a tedious process, and sometimes I feel a little bit unsure of my movement. Now, I want to say this is one of the nicer bows on the market. If we are talking about how does this stack up against all other bows, beautiful draw cycle. However, if we're going to talk about how it performs against like brand new flagship premium bows from other companies, I'm talking like high-end bows, north of $1,000 USD, I do think I would give it like a 3.5 or a 4. I think there's a little room for improvement, and it's not quite as smooth. Like that fall over is a little bit harsh. And I almost think it's because that valley is so wide at the end. It's like you fall over and you don't fall right into the back wall. You have this gap where there's no resistance whatsoever, and then you smack into the back wall. And so, yeah, like I said, it's quite good, but let's say 4 out of 5 as far as draw cycle goes. Now, extras, this is just an area where I wanted the ability to mention interesting things. And really on this bow, I would say it was the first Hoyt to come out with this kind of lower stabilizing option. I think that's pretty cool. I also think the Picatinny rail mount for the sight is a very big deal. You have this on the Hoyt bows. You have the bridge lock for the Matthews bows. But any of these inline sights and the ability of where they've moved the Hoyt quiver up to the top, the ability they've increased the ability of the bow to keep the weight towards the center of mass, and that's why it levels so good left to right. So I really think that was like one of the fundamental upgrades as far as the Hoyt RX-7 goes compared with previous versions of the RX series. Shootability. This is going to be a combination of my subjective experience with anchoring, drawing back, accuracy, all that kind of stuff that you can't really put a number to. And that's just basically how well does this bow shoot for me. And in order for me to describe that, I'm going to rank it 4 out of 5. Now, in order for me to describe that, I'm going to go back to how I selected this bow. So when I went to the bow rack, I think I shot 5 different bows. I shot a Prime, I shot a Matthews, I shot the Ventum, I shot this, and I shot maybe a PSE. That's what it was. Now, one thing to note about string angle is the angle of the string at full draw as it comes down to the axles. For guys with longer draw lengths, that string angle gets shallower. So we tend to use larger axle to axle bows because it sharpens the string angle and we tend to sit a little bit better in there. The thing that the Hoyt did for me is that every time I pulled back, I use a hinge release, so I anchor with my 2 knuckles on my jaw right here. And then when I lean down, the tip of my nose comes to my string. And I'll do some videos about this for the other reviews coming up, and I'll show how I sit in that area with each of the bows. Now, the thing about the Hoyt, because of the string angle, every time I sat down into it, it was like my anchor, my jaw anchor, my nose anchor, and my sight through the peep, it just lined up beautifully. Like beautifully. I really liked the way the Matthews shot. However, I kind of had to like find my peep every time. Like it just didn't fit my, body composition particularly well. Now, I think an analogy that might help explain this is when you lean down onto your rifle and look through a scope. Scopes have an eye box, and we've all had those opportunities when we lean down and you just couldn't line up and get a full sight picture in the scope. And that's because that scope and that cheek weld and that rifle it's not ergonomically designed to fit your body as optimally as it could be. So you're forcing it. We've also all had those opportunities when we laid down and it was like as soon as your cheek hit the cheek weld of the rifle, boom, full sight picture, crystal clear, full round circle, everything is perfect. That's what the Hoyt was like for me. So I'm 6'1", 240 pounds. I have a 29.5 inch draw and like pretty long arms. So what I'm saying is that for the bigger dudes who like longer axle to axle bows, this Hoyt shot incredibly well for me. Those are all the categories that I have created to date. I walked through each of them, gave you a bit of details. Now, I want to talk about how this rest coming off influences my decision to shoot or not shoot this bow or Hoyt again. So I had a lot of talk with Kellen, who knows just as much about archery as anybody I know. He emailed the Hoyt rep, and I posted this on social media. And with the exclusion of 2 people, every single person said they'd never seen anything like this before. Now, one guy said he's had multiple inserts come out of carbon bows. I found it surprising when no one else had. And somebody else said that it happened on their Hoyt Spider, that the rest insert came out. And so that is one of the flaws of carbon. You will notice all of the inserts are glued or epoxied in. You can't screw into carbon fiber. Now, I really do think this is a 1 in a million thing. It wasn't particularly cold. I can see the epoxy here, and there's really only one piece where there's any epoxy. I think either A, it wasn't epoxied properly, or B, there was a failure in the epoxy itself. I mean, I've made a ton of my own arrows. Sometimes I don't mix the epoxy well enough, and I'll have broadheads come out in a target, 3 months later. It happens. That's not what upset me. When I tried to deal with Hoyt, I phoned them and I said to them, I explained the situation. They're like, oh yeah, 100% that's a warranty issue. And I said, okay, now that we both agreed this is a warranty issue, it's Hoyt's fault, not my fault. Here's the problem. I'm in the middle of my bow season right now. I literally have 3 weeks of blacktail hunting I can do with my bow near home. It's one of the only bow-only seasons coming up in British Columbia for the first 2 weeks of December. And then after that, I have a limited entry draw tag in New Mexico for archery mule deer, January 1st to 15th. I said, I think it would be reasonable if you guys helped fix this problem for me, like send me a loaner bow, figure out something so that I can shoot, because they said normally it's a 10-day turnaround, but because this is such a weird circumstance, they said it's going to be at least a month. Like they want to give it their text for 3 weeks. And if you put shipping on the beginning and the end, we're talking at least a month to 5 weeks for them to look at this. And I said, even if you get it back by January 1st, I've got nothing to shoot for 4 weeks to practice for this New Mexico hunt. And then I don't get to hunt blacktail. And they essentially told me I'm screwed. They don't do loner bows, and they were not interested in coming up with any type of solution. Now, a couple people asked me, did you tell them about the YouTube channel? Did you tell them about the podcast? I don't do that. When I deal with brand A, that is a douchebag thing to say. Like threaten them. I'm going to talk about you shitty on my podcast. I'm not talking shitty about the company, and I'm not using this platform to like get preferential treatment from brands. My goal as a reviewer is to share what your experience as a general retail consumer would be with brands. I mean, even when I do these bow things, like I won't call bow shops and tell them I'm doing reviews. I don't want special treatment. I will literally just order the bow like anybody else. I don't think it's appropriate that they don't have some kind of system in place for mid-season issues with bows. When it's such a clear-cut warranty case like this, why should my hunting season be cut short because you failed at manufacturing a product up to a certain minimum quality spec? So I don't want to overreact because this just happened yesterday, the conversation with Hoyt. I don't want to put him on blast. I'm not going to say I'm never shooting Hoyt again. Here's what I will say. In the realm of customer service and in like how they can choose to deal with people, the way they chose to deal with me certainly doesn't encourage me to entertain any type of loyalty to their product. Like they had a lot of options for things they could have done in order to try and, facilitate this quicker. I still don't even have an RA number. This happened last Wednesday. Today is Tuesday. It's been a week. I emailed and texted with the guy who built the bow, the shop that built the bow. I've had Hoyt on the phone. So this bow hasn't even been able to ship back yet because you can't put it in a box and ship it until you have an RA number. So now it was over Thanksgiving and the bad shot was on Wednesday. So I will cut them some slack for the first couple days, but they've already had 2 full business days this week. I don't have an RA number. They weren't willing to replace the bow. That, it just does not speak well of their concern for customers. Now, I'd like to leave this open for dialogue. What have your experiences been like with customer service with bow companies? Do you have any outstanding stories where they've been fantastic? Do you have any horror stories where you got completely screwed? I would love to hear about them because I need that information for this series of reviews. So please drop that in the comments section below. All right. I know this one was a little bit rough around the edges. We had a lot of information to get through and I really wanted to go over this bow. I will say overall, I've been very happy with this bow. This is the best bow I've ever owned, the best bow I've ever shot. I'm really looking forward to checking out all the new bows and seeing how they stack up against this one. So from the top, let's go over this again. We're going to embark on the largest series of reviews the channel has ever done. We're going to look at least 6 aluminum riser bows over the next 6 months. If you have any particular requests, drop them in the comments section below. I am launching a raffle today for the compound bow of your dreams. Any aluminum riser compound bow along with $500 for any accessories of your choice, mindful-reviews.com. At the end of each of the 1-month reviews, I will raffle off that kind of in basically brand new shape compound bow. And at the end, we'll probably do another bow of your dreams, or we'll do the winner and like fully outfitted, like top of the line sight, top of the line rest, all of it. Maybe I'll even include a brand new version of the release that I like to use. So that's where we're at. As always, questions, comments, concerns, drop them down below. Would really be great if you could boost this content up. YouTube does not organically promote hunting content. So like, comment, share, subscribe, any of that is greatly helpful. And as always, until next time, thank you for tuning in.